here with the Uptown Standard Podcast Uncut Crew. I am your host, and today we get to sit down with Miss Alexandra Hunt, who is a Democrat running for PA's 3rd Congressional District. Alexandra, thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Of course. And do you go by Alexandra, Alex?
Alexandra.
Alexandra, okay. Let me make sure. So let's get right into it because I like to keep these, short, keep people on their feet. So let's start off with just a question about you. So doing some research on you, it seems that you grew up in a pretty humble, like working class family. Both parents are teachers. You're a twin. I believe I read that your brother did grow up with a learning disability. So I see why you really wanted to be an advocate from a young age, like your motivation there. However, running for Congress, it's a bit of a different ball game, a little bit of a higher stakes game. So what was the tipping point for you that really made you want to throw your hat into the arena and, run for Congress?
Yeah, I think that really says it well, is that it was a tipping point. There was a breaking point. And up until then, I was reluctantly participating in a system that didn't favor me, didn't favor my loved ones, doesn't favor a lot of us. And just knowing that if I wanted anything to change, I would have to participate. And so I was community organizing, and when involved through healthcare and a public health means. And when the pandemic first struck, I really just got out and wanted to be on the ground and with people. People were really scared. And so I was working at Fox Chase Cancer Center, and I flexed my hours so that I could also be out in the community, testing, later vaccinating, also doing food distribution, distributing menstrual items, and just really being there as people grappled with this unprecedented time. And I was at a food distribution site, and it was one day that week. And there were multiple sites that were happening over the course of a week. And the line was so long. It was around the building and down the street. And that was my breaking point, was we should not have lines this long. And we're not getting enough help and enough resources out of our government. They're not here on the ground seeing how scared people are and how much in need we are. And so the quickest and fastest way to get resources to the ground, in my perspective, is through Congress.
Okay. And currently you're known as the anti-establishment candidate, right? So can you elaborate a bit for us, just, where you started to break away from the Democratic establishment? What was the breaking point for you in that regard? And specifically, how does your platform differ from that of the Democratic Party?
I don't think I ever broke away from Democrats. I think, as I said, I've been that outsider to the party. I've never really believed that the two-party system properly reflects us in the United States, and doesn't center the people who it should be centering, which are everyday people, and again, people on the ground. So I like to use my right to vote. And so I'm a Democrat, so I can participate in every single election. And the Republican Party by no means reflects what I believe. The Democratic Party is a little bit closer. But before Senator Bernie Sanders ran for president, I didn't think that my beliefs had a space in American politics. I thought I was too far to the left. No way the United States could get there. It just wasn't the climate. And when I saw Bernie Sanders run in 2016, I realized that actually, no, the people are there. The people are to the left. It's the inner workings of our government that are still conservative, moderate, and fighting with each other over very, very little wiggle room. But the rest of the people know that universal health care would change people's lives for the better. It would better our economy. Student debt cancellation would better our economy, change people's lives. And these are all good things that are debated over in Congress, but the rest of us, the majority of us, support it. And so that's where I first saw and was inspired that we need people to run these insurgent campaigns into that echo chamber where they're not getting these ideas that are supported by the majority of people. And so where do I differ from the Democratic establishment on my platform? It's pretty much the platform I'm running on puts people first and puts the needs first over corporations. We have not taken a single penny of corporate money, of dark money, and that's because we are beholden to the people and fighting for the people, and that is our only goal. So I'm running on a Green New Deal. I'm running on Medicare for all. I'm running on what I'm calling a New Deal for education, but that's federal funding into public education, something that we don't ever talk about for who knows why, but our schools are crumbling, and an education system is vital for a healthy democracy, which we are moving away from. I'm running on criminal justice reform and to get down our prison populations urgently. And I'm running on economic justice to close the wealth gap. And in order to close the wealth gap, we have to do things like pay Black American reparations. We have to do things like tax the rich. We have to do things like raise a living wage. So I'm running on things that should be non-negotiable that Democrats and Republicans like to debate over.
Okay. All right. So, and you're running against Dwight Evans, longtime resident of Philadelphia, grew up in Germantown and West Oak Lane, taught in the Philly school district. Whereas I believe I read that you grew up in Richmond, Virginia. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Rochester, New York, and then I went to college and University of Richmond. I moved down there and then came to Philly.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And then came to Philly. Okay. So my question really centers around, why do you feel that you're the best option to represent Pennsylvania's 3rd Congressional District, having spent, a good amount, but a limited amount of time in Philadelphia, rather than the incumbent who grew up here, who taught here, who spent the majority of his life here? How do you convince voters that have spent their lives, born and raised in Philly, that you're the person to represent them, having, again, spent a limited amount of time in Philly?
So I just wanted to do a language correction here. I'm not running to represent anyone. I'm running to fight for PA3 and to get us the resources that we need so that people can thrive. To me, representation has become a passive term, and it allows these people to sit in seats for decades. And that's not what I'm aiming to do. I'm not planning on sitting in a seat. I'm a hard worker. I plan on working my butt off to try to get us what we need. So that I'm running to fight for PA3. And while Dwight Evans has grown up here and is a well-known name in Philly and Philly politics for sure, he doesn't come around anymore. And I think that there has been a pretty blatant disconnect from where he came from versus where he is now. We know that he doesn't come around the district. We know that he doesn't answer his phones. We know that he's not in his office. We know he shows up for the photo op and leaves. And otherwise he's getting ready to sit back and enjoy the rest of his life. And that's a perfectly acceptable age to do that. But I since coming to Philly, I have been involved in the community. And not only that, the experiences that I have lived through are closer sitting to a lot of the community experiences too. And I'm not saying that my opponent has not had hard experiences, but I think that we need to be working with people who know exactly what it's like to have to decide between, am I going to buy ramen noodles and eggs for myself, or am I going to be able to get dog food to feed my dogs so that I can pay off my student debt, which is something that I was grappling with just a couple of years ago. And so with that so fresh in my experience, I want to make sure that nobody else has that experience. And for Dwight Evans, who's held public office for 42 years, whatever his experiences were prior to that are just not fresh anymore. And so it's just a time for a change and for some new ideas and definitely some new energy and new fight so that we can, again, get the resources we need.
Okay. All right. And did you ever consider running, where you grew up at all, or was it always running in Philly for you?
I never considered running, and as I grew up in Rochester, I knew I was leaving. It was not home for me. And when I came to Philly, I fell in love. I fell in love with the personality of the city and its grittiness, and it's I knew that I wasn't leaving, and I didn't stay here to run for office either. I stayed here because I fell in love and I want to be here. And again, I decided to run for office because we weren't getting the resources we needed.
Okay. All right. And so I've watched some of your recent interviews. And to be honest, we're not here to talk about your past as an exotic dancer. I want to talk policy with you. Okay. So let's talk criminal justice reform in a city that's up to 700 murders this year. Areas like West Philly, Mount Airy, where residents are scared. Their gun ownership has skyrocketed. Philly Magazine, as well as the Pennsylvania Capital Star, recently both did articles on how both the permits for concealed carry permits, the applications for those have increased at an alarming number, as well as the number of applications that are being accepted are also increasing. Looking at some of the policies that you're running on, why would people that are scared, they're in their communities, why would they go for policies, centered around taking guns away or making it harder to get guns or demilitarizing the police when they want the police to protect them, or releasing people from prison early, from jail early, putting more criminals on the street? Why would people that are scared in their communities go for policies like that?
So a lot to unpack there. To start, I'm not talking about releasing criminals into the streets. I'm talking about bringing home people who have a nonviolent conviction or who have done decades of their life in prison, or I mean, even years, that being kept in a cage and perpetuating the trauma that put them there. What we have here is we're caught in a cycle of pain, and it's feeding off of each other, and it's causing people to go get guns and to be scared and to arm themselves. And in order to de-escalate the situation, we need people who know how to de-escalate. And that's something that I have done. I was working with what was known as Camp JTD. It was the encampment that formed on JFK Boulevard, and was a pretty large community of unhoused people. And so I don't have a gun. Maybe I shouldn't be saying that publicly. But my job was to be a crisis responder. And so I do think that people need to respond in crisis. And I have been an EMT, and I know that when you are going through one of the hardest moments of your life, you don't want to be alone. You want someone to show up. You want to feel safe. You want to feel protected. And I believe our communities need that. But what I'm talking about is that we don't need somebody whose knee-jerk reaction is to go to their weapon and to potentially kill someone or potentially harm someone and continue to perpetuate that trauma of control and abuse. So we need to shift towards focusing on mental health treatment before it gets to the point where somebody is going into a Brooklyn subway and shooting people. We are in a reactionary place, and we need to try to get ahead of this violence, this uptick in violence and in crime. And in doing that, we need to recognize, where is this coming from? And it's coming from an unbroken cycle of trauma. And so we need resources. Again, it keeps coming back to resources, but we need people to feel stable in their lives and secure in their lives through affordable housing, through education to opportunity pipelines, through mental health and proper health care. And the gun reform that I'm talking about are gun safety measures, that if you have a gun, you should know how to be safe with it. You should know how to put it away properly so that young people who don't know what they're doing can't get into it, or people who have that questionable mental health background can seek mental health treatment instead of finding your gun. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about taking precautionary measures so that we're not having such a high rate of deaths in our city or across the nation. And of the people who have died, there was one person working on our campaign, a young man. Another young man was one of my friends, and he was out walking his dog. The guy working on my campaign was coming back to school and unpacking his car. So this loss is felt by me personally, and it's felt by our community, and I know we're in pain and we're scared. And so I am fighting for a platform of accountability. And I think that that's where it gets misconstrued, is like, oh, you know, they just want to release criminals into the streets and nothing's to be done. No, if you're harming a community, you need to leave the community. You cannot be there. You're a threat. But that doesn't mean that the answer is to then punish this person until they have no chance of rehabilitation. It means that we need to take them out and rehabilitate them and give them a different pathway, a better pathway, that this isn't the answer.
Okay. All right. And last question for you here, Alexandra. All right. So let's say your campaign is unsuccessful in defeating incumbent Dwight Evans. What's the next step? Are you thinking about running for city council?
No, I have not thought about that. And I think a lot of people are thinking about that. And some of them are my friends, and I plan on supporting their races for sure. I am planning on winning on May 17th. And if that's not the case, then the goal of our campaign was to get closer to the federal resources and to get it onto the ground quickly, because people need it. And so if this is not the pathway that is going to lead to that, then I will find another way.
Well, Alexandra, I really appreciate your time again today. It's been wonderful speaking with you. Everyone, again, my name is Gia, your host with the Uptown Standard Podcast Uncut Crew, with Alexandra Hunt as well. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.